Welcome to the last bit of October. Was this a red October? Red enough for you? Well, there's a little bit of October left, heading into November. So the end of this next CIRF week ends on 11/3, November 3rd. That's going to be an interesting date. And for those of you who are tired of the pressure and the conflict and the squares, got bad news for you. Grand Cross this week. Grand Cross. In other words, 4 T-squares all at the same time. Doesn't that sound pleasant? Whoopsie. Sorry, we'll do that a little bit later. All right, here's our summary slide. Now, what we're trying to do here, we're going to triangulate for the main energy. In the astrology is just all these alignments. Planets are everywhere. You got Mars breaking free. You've got the sun changing, well, just freshly changed signs, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different energies. We're going to triangulate for the single biggest energy that you have a possibility of feeling this week. And then towards the end, we'll triangulate again for the solution. In other words, how best to behave, what are the best actions commensurate with the energies afforded to us. So you're basically surfing. We're surfing energies. And so it's a play on words. The CIRF, CIRF, is the collective influence and report and forecast. Okay, so first portion is the influence. And you can see for the first time, I put a square in the middle of our diagram. And that's because, you know what? I screwed that up. Wow. All right. Well, I'm not going to go back and do that. Really, what should happen is the purple should be the square, because the Grand Cross represents a square. As you're going to see in the diagrams, it is a square. So in the astrology, the main energy from the stars is this big old Grand Cross. And it's a quick one because one of the corners is the moon, and the moon likes to go around the zodiac a lot faster than the rest. But so this Grand Cross doesn't stay around very long, but the T-square portion on Saturn is what stays. It sticks the whole week. And so half of that Grand Cross is going to be there the entire week. I'll explain that a little bit more. But the square is represented correctly. It's like right in the middle of the astrology. And I think what I was thinking when I had built this a few days ago, this slide here, without the DreamBot, of course, but with the I-Ching patience, as you're going to see, the hexagram for I-Ching as I read this is very commensurate with what you'd think of as a Grand Cross. And so I think that's why I put that as the square, because the I-Ching represents just that Grand Cross energy. Okay. And then when we look at the DreamBot, this one's really interesting, although I think there's still some deficits in the way the DreamBot is reading some of the web pages. You have the memes are life and death. And we're getting deep. We're not doing superficial stuff anymore. But then there's this meme of fellowship, just getting together, talking. Anyway, if you put life and death in here, it doesn't really overlap with the Grand Cross because it's a sort of a different energy. I mean, it's supposed to be related in there, but I put them off to the side because like the death part would be a very Pluto thing, and then life would be more of the earthy thing, and all those things are not in the Grand Cross. So in addition to the Grand Cross, I'm sorry I'm spending so much time on this summary, but as you're going to see, the Grand Cross has a lot of squares, but there's more squares. And there's like the Venus has a square, Pluto has a square. So that makes sense. So the DreamBot is seeing other squares while the I-Ching is pulling in mainly from that Grand Cross. So the overlap, it has to do with the feeling of like the death component, or the impending, the feeling of doom. And so if you put that into a feeling, I'm guessing that a lot of us are going to feel like, okay, because you imagine Mars coming out from underneath the sun, Mars getting out of Gemini, I believe. We'll check that. But anyway, your yang is coming alive. Now I have the ability to do stuff. And yet you have all this tension, pressure, conflict, don't know which way is up, but you're ready and roaring and rearing. And I think that's going to result in this feeling of pent upness, pinging and pacing. That's what I'm calling this week. And it's a pretty high congruency because it's all three overlapped. All right. With that, let's get into the details. We'll get some comments first, and then we'll get into the DreamBot and then the astrology. Hang on. And if you have not subscribed yet, I highly encourage you to do so in three places. First, YouTube. Second, Rumble. Both of those channels are growing slowly. And then the final suggestion is Telegram, because you just never know what's going to be happening with these different social medias. And Telegram and Rumble, those links are down in the description box. All right, so just really quick, speaking of these different platforms, what I have is a conglomeration of different comments from the different places. On Rumble, no one you know has talked about squares adding to our power. And yes, that concept is going to be really important this week, as I sort of already mentioned, but they also say so our ability to think critically, plan, act, and yes, even hope and dream as individuals rather than as easily gaslit sheeple is a cornerstone block in the foundation of our power. Don't ever give that away, humans. Very well said, no one you know. And that was on Rumble. And then over on Telegram, a big shout out to Terry, who I'll just read it. I had a beautiful day, an awful lot of awake people in the journey around Boone. My surgical staples are out after a successful spinal surgery. CIRF reports are always correct. Thanks for the shout out, Terry, but mostly shout out to you and healthy and whole and yourself and your family. And thanks for keeping us updated. That's over on Telegram, and there's actually two portions of Telegram. Number one, there's the main page. That's the link below. But if you go into a comment section, you can actually enter the chat forum and you can subscribe to that. So we just have a handful of people who are chatting quite a bit, and we're getting closer to the truth. That's sort of our goal. We don't all think the same, but that's what the benefit is that we can bat some ideas around, not in a conflicted way, but in an explorative, curious way, seeking truth. All right. Now, over on YouTube, Kay says, thanks for another great report. Reminding myself this week to take baby steps and just breathe. I think you've got the energy right. And I think that's going to step up this week. So not that you're going to be taking these baby steps, but you're going to still feel that sort of holding back or the pressure to hang back. And we'll get into that later. But shout out to Kay. And Dustin says that it feels as though we are living inside of an overinflated tire. I hadn't thought about that, but I thought that was kind of cute and accurate. And Leanne says, I am learning and understanding so much more about astrology and the energies when re-listening to your report the week after and compare to the events that happened in my life. You have a wonderful gift. Thank you for sharing this with us. Thank you, Leanne. That is very kind of you to say. And shout out to all three of you on YouTube. And then Not For Me and Time and Nature tied for the top comments. With 4 each, no replies on either one, so there was no tiebreaker. But Not For Me to say says that I hope everyone is healthy, happy, and had a great week. thank you for the guidance in the CIRF report. And then talks about going over to Rumble. A lot of you supporting on both channels, and that warms my heart quite a bit. Time in Nature says sleep has always been a problem. This is in response to our last week's discussion on sleep and dreams. Unfortunately, he's having much, much worse opinion on breakdown of defense system exposure through documents that people have engaged in corruption, which destroys their defense, where they have hid behind lies. Yeah, that is inevitable too, especially in Age of Aquarius. So shout out to all of the comments, the ones that I didn't mention. I don't have any rhyme or reason. Just feel compelled to give shout outs to folks, and thank you for your time and effort to help out our algorithm. So here's the DreamBot. And it's a weird one. Okay, so first of all, there's some higher surge scores, which is nice. And then I think there was 30 words. So we're getting back to the basket of normal in DreamBot, but it's still sort of holding back, having problems getting to more of the websites, but it looks like it's pretty healthy. Now, the red and the blue might as well just be one meme, and you can call it life and death, but I differentiated the two. It's clear, and some of those, like the top word for death is shred. Emotional has to do with both. I probably could just take it off of both, but I thought it was applicable. And then the blue top word is life, and universe and expansive. I mean, it's just like the reality of life. In fact, reality is one of the words, or realistic. So anyway, life and death was very clear. And then fellowship, thank and share, speaking, links. So definitely some sort of interchange using communication in a grateful way. Thanks was one of those words. So fellowship will be a strong factor in how we get through this period of time. All right. Are we ready for the astrology? Well, say hello to the last few days of, I was going to say Halloween, but last few days of October. And Mars is going to go into Scorpio, as you can see here. You've got the Saturn square Uranus as part of our big Grand Cross. And we'll make up to the Grand Cross, and let me darken it up so you can see right in here. There's also this hidden sextile of Venus sextile Jupiter, and that should provide some opportunities in here. And Venus, remember, this is that fellowship alignment in the stars. Then we get into November, just to give you a real brief overview. Venus in the first week, it'll be the next CIRF week, but the first week in November will go into Capricorn. And then Mercury is going to go into Sag towards the end. Sun is going to go into Sag. Sag and Mercury are going to go in. Sun and Mercury, that's an incorrect sign, are going into Sagittarius. Look at all that red. We'll cover that as we get there, but there are a few greens, so mostly sextiles and trines. So it's not all just conflicted. But what will be getting more and more conflicted is that Saturn square Uranus that we've been talking about for so long now. That's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger until December. So I'm thinking December 13th, but don't quote me on that. It's somewhere around there. So Thursday the 28th, you can see I had to draw this in because it was not showing all of this. I just used my noon time frame, or 12 p.m. I don't know why I happened to use that exact time. hour 12, minute 12, and 12 seconds in Central Time. I don't know. Is that meaningful for anybody else? I just decided to do it. But it's close to 12 noon Central Time. And the moon at this time is at 4 degrees. So you can see how you've got the sun at 5 degrees Scorpio, Saturn at 7 degrees Scorpio, but Uranus is at 13. So this is the odd man out because the alignments are not quite, it's not going to be an exact grand cross, but it's going to be an energetic influence, particularly when the moon gets a little bit further out. So, within 8 degrees of the orb of the Uranus. So we're looking at right around 5 degrees. So in the afternoon on Thursday, the 28th, the moon will enter about 5 degrees of Leo and create this grand cross. Now, a grand cross sounds wonderful, right? Cross in the sky and very symbolic. Well, not so fast because it's all T-squares. So you have two 180 degree first. So you have two oppositions. Those are two major balancing points. So for example, the sun and the ego have to balance with in Scorpio has to balance with big change in the material world and how you sense things. And that's just one of the crosses. And then the other cross is Saturn and the moon. So you got to balance emotions and emotions that need to be recognized. The Leo, the childlike emotions, balanced out with the stern, hard, chiseled grandpa Saturn and Aquarius, and hardship or status quo. So, and then each one of those has a square or the 90 degrees from the other. And so basically we have this T-square on steroids because each point is a T-square, right? So you got 4 times the normal T-square. Okay. So then that's going to last until the moon gets to about 20 degrees Leo. And so that's roughly the next day, probably by 20. So we're still in this. Okay, so now actually I misspoke. It's not 20 because once the moon is at 20 Leo, then that's gone too far for the orb on the sun. So it's going to be in the morning is when this is going to end, the morning of Friday, the 29th. And it's going to have to end before 14. The moon gets to 14 degrees Leo. All right, so that'll be mid-morning for most of us. But, as I said before, look at all these squares. As I mentioned on the summary page, you had Pluto with a square over to Mercury. And of course, we have the T-square, that's Saturn, that's why I've got it circled, is still in conflict. And it's a trap, and it's got additional squares in there with the surrounding planet. Pluto, Mars, Mercury, all squared down here with either Saturn or Pluto. So extra tension, extra conflict, extra pressure. Meanwhile, look at this. As I mentioned also, Mars, 29 degrees of Libra. That's what I meant. I said Gemini. I meant Libra. It's the other air sign. Anyway, Mars is weakened in Libra, and they're 7 degrees away from the sun. So still in this extra weakened state, but here shortly throughout this week, not only is Mars stepping out of Libra, going home to Scorpio, ruler of Scorpio. So getting his power back that way, but also getting sufficiently distanced from the sun to no longer be in combust. Both of those things happen by the 1st of November. and Mars and your related yang energy, your motivated energy is going to feel finally like charging, like going, like doing, like pushing forth, like pushing up. But you got all this conflict, and that's exactly what the I-Ching is going to show to you. But all this pressure as Mars wakes up basically is energy full of pressure. And that could be pressure to do something, especially for Mars in that pressure. It pressurizes the needs of that planet. So ego, Mars, and your thoughts, Mercury, all get, and your yang energy in you get pressurized and need to push forth on the other side. So Saturn square Mars, for example, that's fighting and keeping things the same, and hardships and obstacles and all that. Well, those two seem like opponents, and maybe they are, but they can work together. But oops, they can't, because there's a square there, and so it becomes conflicted. So that makes those two components hard to deal with. Same thing with Pluto, the inner subconscious power, and it's worth talking about because the DreamBot basically has a whole meme full of Pluto. And so Pluto is mainly conflicted with thoughts, communication, and so you have this death and rebirth, like mentally, logic. Your logic might seem like it's the illusion of its ending, maybe a certain thought logic. And all things are covered here, as above, so below. If this is a true energy, then you're going to see old logic falling away. Death and rebirth too. How people have justified, I don't know, certain things. All that gets pressurized into clarity. And it feels deathly, feels like death to that Mercury aspect, logic, rationality, able to think, able to communicate, somehow feels like it's dying, goal-oriented dying, because it's Capricorn. All right. Have we had enough yet? This is day 2. And then lastly, Mercury in conjunct to Neptune. Neptune, by the way, has the square over to Venus. A lot of people have been talking about that. But mainly, this is the tightest one. The tightest alignment is Mercury in conjunct Neptune. And that is adjusting to your dreams, adjusting to the mystical area, the transpersonal, the hyper spiritual portion of life, and having to adjust your thoughts and the way that you express outwardly, and vice versa. The T-square continues. This is Saturday into the weekend now, October 30th, day before Halloween. And Mars is free. Mars just stepped out of Libra, and whoosh, all sorts of new energy. And this is going to be more obsessive energy, passionate energy. We're 7 degrees away from the sun, and so really close to being a full up Mars. Okay, except that T-square, Saturn and Uranus. But the trap portion is the status quo, is the way things should be. Saturn's the should planet, and hardship arises from that, as you'll see with the I-Ching. Sunday, the 31st, the center point still is that T-square on Saturn. Still got the squares. You've added Venus now has a couple sextiles. That's to Jupiter, and that's going to be, let's see, that one's already passed, but it's still applicable, and that's an opportunity over to wisdom Your relationships have an opportunity to get really wise through this process. That has been here all week, but it's overshadowed by all this other extreme pressured energy, Grand Cross. And Venus now has a tightening sextile, so it's going to get stronger, but the sextile to Mercury. So your thoughts in Libra, thoughts of justice, thoughts of equalizing or equilibrium, balance, have an opportunity to improve relationships or provide a lot more spiritual insight, philosophy on relationship. And then Monday, still have the T-square, so trapped in Saturn. Still have the sextiles. Just same. And now we're 8 degrees away. Oh, I forgot to mention, obviously, this is Halloween. What's probably the scariest is this Pluto and Mercury, I would assume. I don't know if it, just the reversing, the way that Mars has been held down and the reversing of that, any of these big reversals can be scary because it's an adaptation process. You're adapting to the new energy. Anytime there's a new energy, and the bigger it is, the more your body, your mind, your spiritual self has to adapt. So I would imagine that in and of itself is going to be sort of a crazy energy. And that's interesting too. I guess it's worthy talking about on Halloween is Neptune in opposition with the moon. It's probably appropriate. The moon being your emotional self, your motherly instincts are on opposite sides of fantasy, escapism, illusion, deception. I don't know. I don't know if that's applicable to Halloween or not. You guys can determine that for yourselves. Monday, the 1st. Welcome to November. Not much has changed. You still have the T-square with Saturn. Why do we still have that? Well, because the Saturn to Uranus, this square is just going to get tighter and tighter, and it's going to be there all throughout November and most of December. And then these other planets, not the moon, so just as closer other planet, but that's why it's hanging out here for so long. When the sun, when the sun gets past this T-square, then Mars is going to take over, and this T-square is going to perpetuate for quite some time. All right, Tuesday, the same, although now we've dropped off the Venus sextile Jupiter. I don't see there's not a lot of changing here. Everything I mentioned before is pretty much the same. Now, here's what's interesting. Wednesday the 3rd, I used just the same time I always use, 12 p.m. Central Time. And where's the sun? The sun is at 11 degrees, Scorpio, 30 minutes. It's like 11:03. Thought that was interesting. On 11:03, the sun is at 11:03 or 11:30. That I thought was pretty interesting. But I still have to, and for our conversion chart, we're going to use Saturn just because that's the central focus on the T-square. But I just wanted to point that out. And I even have a rave to describe what that might be so that you guys can assimilate it if you need to. But the sun opposed Uranus is at its closest point because the sun's now at 11:30 and Uranus is at 12:50. So getting pretty close. This opposition is tight, and it's the balancing, the need to balance change of Uranus with your ego obsessions and your passions. Your passions and fast changing, unexpected changes to your material and sensory apparatus. Okay, so be aware of that. All right, that does it for astrology. Let's get into the I-Ching. We had 2 change lines, and it was hexagram 5. Patience. A fisherman can cast the line, but still can only wait for the fish to bite. Your catch will come in its own good time. Only through patience that you can become the bridge between the fickle fish and the eventual feast. Strength in a time of trial waits quietly, resolutely. Weakness grows agitated. That is where I sort of developing this concept of pinging and pacing as the overall energy. Weakness grows agitated. And in this week, according to astrology, it's not that we're weak this time. It's the external forces are too much compared to our growing Mars energy. But same effect, still becomes agitated, abandoning the effort before the fish start biting. Right? And we don't want to do that. Time weakens even the hardest obstacles, and that's why patience is the key here. But steadfast waiting, holding to your integrity, leads to slow but permanent improvements. Be content and practice patience. But remember, this hexagram, this first hexagram, is all about the influence, all about the energy. But when we go look at these change lines, and we had 2 of them, they're going to give us some suggestions about behavior, and it's worth reading because it's our bridge to the second hexagram. Troubling events may be looming, causing some apprehension. Do not try to alter the path that has been set for you at this time. Rest assured that you are heading in the right direction. Do not become impatient or greedy. Now, remember about the 11.3? On 11.3, the sun is at 11.3. Line 5 says, when the storm hits, it can behoove you to enjoy a glass of wine. But you can replace that with any sort of sensory thing. So in indulgence, but a calm, peaceful, not exaggerated, not escapism, but just sensory that says you're in the moment. And that's when the storm hits. So, is the storm going to hit? In the midst of difficult situations, more often comes a temporary pause. Use this interval to fortify your position, not by continuing to dwell on the swirl of events around you, but by taking a moment of relaxation. Recharge your batteries by having fun rather than further draining them from worry. So here's how in encapsulating all this, putting it together so far, what we have Mars breaking out. So your yang energy is coming up, rising up, but you have all this conflict outside. It looks like the world is collapsing. The storm might be hitting, according to the I-Ching. And so you have to first take a break. And I think this is because Mars, in the early parts of the week, Mars is still weakened, extra weakened. So it takes a couple days to get Mars up and running. And when he does, now we get into 46. When you put the change lines in, boom, pushing upward. Natural advancement is represented by growth in springtime when new plant life pushes upward through the earth. The emphasis is on upward motion, a movement from obscurity to influence. That's exactly what's happening in the stars this week with Mars getting full on power back. Constant, flexible growth is the key attribute of a plant pushing upward. This reading suggests a period of promotion and prosperity for you. Sensitive but determined effort against forces of inertia, bending around obstacles that arise, and good fortune will follow. Whew. There's a lot this week. So now put it into our calculator. This is 11.3, and that is hexagram 44 for the sun. But the main trap here, the main focal point for this week, undoubtedly, is going to be that Grand Cross, and the remnants all week long is strong, and it's going to be Saturn, the Saturn trap, and that's in hexagram 41, and we have Sidereal Capricorn. Let's continue. So in 41, this is the gate of contraction. In terms of our genetics, the 41st gate is the only initiator start codon. It attests to the importance of the sensing circuit and this stream of feeling in particular. Recognition is conditioned by the wave. It is never immediate. It is always a process. Patience is the great virtue of the emotionally defined. So we have a double suggestion, totally different hexagrams, but the I-Ching and the rave say the same thing. We need the space of patience. Patience is of great importance. So you have this feeling of pinging and pacing. The feeling gets worse as Mars gets free, but then you feel even more pinging and pacing. So that's why the patience portion is very critical. In the lines, we have contagion. Line 6 says the limitation of resources which maximize development of potential. Look at what's happening out in the world. Decrease, stocking problems, shipping problems, limitation, people warning you to get your Thanksgiving meal preparation stuff now, people telling you to get your Christmas stuff now. We're probably going to see a lot more decrease, a lot more limitation of resources. The rave says the limitation of resources, which maximize the development of potential. So when you see this decrease, or if we see that decrease that I'm talking about, this will actually help the development of potential. In other words, the pendulum that's swinging one way, and the farther it goes, see so that you can see this, the farther it goes, boom, it's going to come to the other side with more aggressive action. All right, the law that the maximization of potential not only ends decrease, but inevitably such transcendence benefits others. The maximization of the potential of form, the father whose success will benefit his children, the fuel for recognition through feelings. Now, I know there's a lot of junk there. You can pause it and rewind it. These I-Ching readings are wonderful, in my opinion. The line readings are wonderful to really get the full benefit of the I-Ching. Nothing comes in good or bad, just one. Everything comes at you, and energy comes at you, and it's both good and bad. It's like, so it's neither, and it's both. And so it represents both of these. So you got to determine how you're going to use that energy and what your intentions are. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and assimilate all of this for you in the summary slide, because this has been a lot. This has been, I think, one of the more difficult I-Ching readings, or the more difficult CIRF reports. Pinging and pacing is the overall energy. Remember, I-Ching 5 said, trouble looms, watch for apprehension and impatience. First, prepare for trouble, then take a break, relax, kick back. And especially around that time that Mars is still down, still weakened in Libra, and still in conjunction with the sun, it's a good time to just kick back. That's the early part of our week, so it's getting into the last days of October. And then as we head into November, it's time to go to more of the solution. Everything in the solution triangulation this week, and we have the I-Ching, the second I-Ching, we have the rave mandala, and we have Sidereal Capricorn. So everything in the solution is encouraging us to rise upward. Even Capricorn likes to rise, climb hills. So Mars exits Libra and it's weakening combust this week, giving us the power to emerge from obscurity. While the influence this week looks dire, the solution is powerful. Sidereal Capricorn tells us to be ambitious, responsible, goal-oriented, and disciplined. Climb that mountain. The goat loves to climb. So climb if it's in front of you. Climb whatever's in front of you and remain flexible to bend around the obstacles as you sprout upwards with willpower and self-control. Remember, the T-square is on Saturn. What does Saturn like to do? It likes to throw hurdles in your journey. And those hurdles are exactly what our rave was warning us about in I-Ching. And you have to basically be flexible and sprout like a plant, just sprout around the obstacles and move upward. Hard times and limited resources has a tendency of creating heroes. We are the heroes. By saving ourselves and seeking our own personal potentials, we benefit the collective. This period is about moving your life towards the world you will eventually hand over to your children. It is that powerful. As we face more adversity and more decrease and more limitation, it's going to produce. It's the power alone to produce breakthrough energy. Pendulum is going to shift at some point, and we eventually will be handing over the world to our children. So we want to make it a better world for sure. It's a time to rise upward, basically. Powerful time to explore your higher purpose, identify your max potential, and plan out your short and long-term ambitions. All rise this week. No apologies and no regrets. All right. Well, how did this affect you? Would like to know. Comments everywhere. Make sure you get on Rumble and Telegram, and I am making a commitment to look at those Rumble comments, especially because I think we need to spend some more time growing that channel. So I appreciate each and every one of you. I know that you're sharing the videos, and I feel blessed by being in this tribe with you. And so anyway, I feel blessed. Let's do another week, folks, and hopefully we get some more breakthrough energy as these dire situations look worse. Maybe even the storm shows up. Got my fingers crossed. All right. Take care, everyone. See you next week. Bye.